Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to define concepts in current media, and I am the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is the nature of aesthetics, and they're free for viewing online at my website, www.philosophypublishing.com. With me is my co-host and colleague, Rick Samuelson. Glad to be with us today, Rick. And the purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts being used in current media. And this week we're going to discuss something that Hillary stated in the debates with candidate Trump. And we're going to title it, Is Experience the Predominant Quality in Choosing the Next President? And as I stated, Hillary in the last debate, or maybe it was the second debate, that she had throughout the election campaign that she's had more experience as Secretary of State, and prima facie qualifies her more than candidate Trump to be President of the United States. Well, let's analyze this and see whether this statement could be true or not. First, is experience the predominant overriding factor by which an electorate should choose its next president? Is experience that important? So let's explore this topic. First, I think it would be good to understand what is experience in the first place. So let's define it. We can say that experience is stimuli coming from outside the consciousness onto the consciousness. There are 2 types of stimuli. First type are those stimuli coming to the consciousness from inside the body. And secondly, it is through stimuli that comes from outside the body onto the consciousness. Therefore, when the consciousness receives a piece of stimuli, let's say it's a piece of light that comes in through your eyeball, that goes through your retina, through the optic nerve, and stimulates cells in the brain, that notifies you that light has come into the brain. This experience becomes information when it arrives at the brain center of consciousness. At this point, so far, the stimuli is just a piece of information. At this point, the brain attaches a priority of importance to the information, which we can call a piece of knowledge. This priority of importance is attached to information coming in order to order the info in our brain, in order to organize our lives, to understand what we should do in our life, and to make our daily decisions from 1 second to the next. Let's take an example. There's a famous syllogism in philosophy, and it goes like this: Socrates is a man. Men are mortal, thus Socrates is mortal. If we were to hang around in Athens, Greece in about the year 450 BC, and we came across this guy named Socrates, this piece of information would enter our brain, and we would note that this guy Socrates walks like a man, he talks like a guy, he acts like a guy, and also he asks a lot of questions. Like a philosopher. So we meet Socrates, and we conclude from deductive logic that Socrates is a man. This is a piece of knowledge. We can say that it is a piece of knowledge because we have met Socrates, and if we have met him, it is through the stimuli of and being information coming into the brain, producing experience that we just met Socrates. In addition, we have stored in our brain other pieces of knowledge that indicate to us what is a man, and we categorize this information. We compare that to that which was Socrates, and sure enough, we conclude that Socrates is a man. At this point, information changes into knowledge because we've attached to the fact that we saw Socrates before us, and attaching the knowledge that he is a man, we conclude he is a man which is a kind of priority. The reason why it is stored in our brain, and that it is knowledge about the fact that this is a man and it is priority, is because it's important to us. When we take in information and we consider the info important, we attach to it a priority, and it comes up a level from information into the realm of the idea of what is knowledge. To do this, we do this because we realize that this piece of information has importance to us, and as such, it becomes prioritized in our brain. Okay, through prioritizing the information about Socrates coming into our consciousness, we come to the conclusion that Socrates is a man. We also know through experience that his information in our brain's memory that men keep dying after they grow up and get old. Through inductive logic, we attach a priority of the syllogism's conclusion that men are mortal. Finally, after we've used inductive knowledge, or actually inductive logic, to establish that men are mortal, we can now use deductive logic to conclude that Socrates is mortal. And this is information that has been transferred to knowledge because of our prioritizing its importance in the conclusion. It's not hugely important, but it is somewhat. So we keep note of it. And how do we know? Because we can use inductive knowledge to conclude that not only is Socrates mortal, but we are mortal also. That is, you and I and everybody around us, we are all mortal, just like Socrates. So in the brain's memory it goes, this piece of knowledge. So now what? Well, looking over this little explication, we see that experience didn't really get or become important until it was prioritized and became a piece of knowledge. So we take experience that becomes information to put into memory, to which we attach a priority, to which it becomes a piece of knowledge, and we use pieces of knowledge in order to prioritize our lives, in order to bring betterment or goodness into our lives. Now, once we have prioritized our lives to bring betterment into it, we look outward. We look outward because beyond us, beyond our individualism, we have those around us, such as to our family and to our kids, and we use our knowledge of how to order our lives in order to order those around us and to help those around us, such as our family and our kids in particular. And we do this to bring goodness into their lives. But it may not stop there, and it doesn't stop there. It may go. It certainly goes right past our family, and we want to bring goodness and betterment into the lives of others in our society, and even beyond that. And that is called ideology. When we bring our prioritized pieces of knowledge on how to order our lives, we then seek to export our knowledge to others, and then it is ideology. So it is not really just experience, because that's only the first step in bringing betterment into our lives and other people's lives, which candidate Hillary and candidate Trump want to do, essentially in their political outlook, and they want to bring their knowledge of the issues that will bring betterment to our society. So in conclusion, what is really needed to bring betterment to the position of the President of the United States, it's a firm and comprehensive ideology. And this ideology consists of experience into information, into knowledge, along with an ability to add deductive and inductive logic to make a person deal with the various problems that will face that person as President of the United States. Using one's logic and knowledge, we can apply this to the various problems and create good decisions that will benefit our society if the candidate has a sound ideology and a good system of logic behind it. So, in conclusion, let's ask Rick who would be the better president. What do you think, Rick? Hillary or Trump?
Well, before I answer that with a sweeping comment, let me make a few observations. Hillary, on paper, has vastly more experience in government than Donald Trump. That's obvious. The issue, really, though, is how effective has that experience made her. Judging from the platform she's put forward, she would continue the policies basically of the Obama administration. Obamacare would remain in place and be tweaked, even though it is obviously irrecoverable. The policies applied to the Middle East that have led to the carnage there, the refugee flows, the failure to confront Russia, and so on and so forth, would continue and likely get worse. The failure to contain terrorism, both here and in Europe, to identify it correctly, to take measures that would actually push it back, to identify the role that refugees play in promoting that terrorism in other countries. That would not change materially, even though it should be addressed immediately with much more forceful measures. In fact, we would continue taking in thousands of Syrian refugees and other refugees, amongst whom there would be terrorists. So, crime. On crime, the same sympathetic stance toward movements like the Black Lives Matter, the harsh handling of police methods and police departments, the rolling back of long-standing practices of patrolling neighborhoods in the cities that are full of high crime and stop and frisk and so on and so forth. That would not change, and murder rates would continue to soar. In Chicago alone, there have been already 600 killings this year already. This is shocking. So if you're asking, is Hillary on paper more qualified than Donald Trump? Obviously she is, but is that necessarily the reason to vote for her, when the policy she's putting forward would represent a continuation of obviously failed policies of the last 8 years? One last note on that. The national debt under Mr. Obama has nearly doubled in 8 years' time. It's gone up by nearly $10 trillion. And yet we have substandard employment, that is to say, participation, the labor participation rate remains well below historical averages. Pay is only started to begin to rise, that is family income, and in recent months, it was going down for several years in a row. Productivity measures remain very, very subdued. Productivity growth is basically nowhere. Corporate investment remains subdued. Basically, the only thing supporting the economy in the U.S. Is consumption. And interest rates have already trended negative at least for sovereign bonds through much of the world, 40% of bonds outstanding. And in the event of another recession in the United States, it's quite likely the financial repression would continue on the part of the Fed, guided, of course, by White House policies, and we'd end up with negative interest rates here. So, on all these counts, taxes would continue to rise. Hillary Clinton's calling for aggressive increases in a number of taxes, corporate income taxes, personal income taxes for income above a certain level, and other taxes as well. And that alone would severely hinder the growth of the economy. And so on so many fronts, from a policy perspective, the prospect of having Hillary in office, irrespective of how many politicians she knows. There was an interesting article in The Economist a week ago arguing that, well, why does everyone hate Hillary? I mean, she's got so many friends amongst the Republican and Democratic political classes, and she gets along with people. What Donald Trump has pointed out is that is the real problem. That inbred culture of Washington, D.C., which has either directly or indirectly led to so many failed policies. And of course, with Obama as president, he's primarily responsible, but you cannot exclude the role that Congress has played. And that includes many Republicans and obviously many Democrats that got us to where we are. Whether it's overspending year after year after year, or tolerating excessive taxation, or the centralized, attempted centralization of control over school boards and other cultural phenomena in the United States. I mean, they're all part and parcel of that. Donald Trump, in attempting, we don't know if he will succeed, that remains to be seen, but in attempting to overturn that cabal, has put his finger on arguably the most central problem of all. In addition to which, if you read through his policy proposals, a lot of them make a lot of sense. Control the borders, lower taxes, reinvest in the military, take a much harsher stance on crime. I mean, this is all bread and butter, common sense stuff. So, irrespective of the fact that on paper he doesn't have direct experience with government, you could argue that that is a major benefit because he won't be beholden to the numerous conflicting interests that Hillary is. And so, given that there is dramatic change required on so many fronts, if the U.S. government is going to run itself into the ground and go bankrupt ultimately, one could argue that Donald Trump may be just the agent of change that's required to start the process of forcing the federal government in particular to become more representative of what the American people want. Poll after poll, survey after survey indicate that a vast majority of Americans think the country is on the wrong path.
Hey, let me ask you something.
Well, you're not going to get it on the right path by hiring a career politician.
Okay. So let me ask you something. You said something really I'd never heard before. Did you suggest that Obama is part of the political establishment? He came in as kind of an outsider, but maybe he's just not really an outsider, but part of the political establishment altogether. What do you think?
Well, has he ever held a real job apart from politician?
Okay.
Or a professor? I don't think he has. Community organizer? I mean,
right.
What is that?
Okay.
Does he know anything about business? Does he really know anything about economics? I don't think so. Very little. He has a smattering of knowledge.
Right. And it shows.
I don't think he understands how the private sector works, actually.
Does any leftist?
Well, even if they do understand it, they will certainly never admit to the great benefits it has caused, particularly for poor people.
Right. Okay, Rick, I want to thank you for your comments. Very instructive. And I hope everybody continues to listen in on the Philosophical Angle program, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.